till infinity and beyond.
I lost my hair. Hey there, Bladers. Today, I'm going to be talking about my experience from switching from flat back to anti-rocker.
Free liquor out the bar in the brightest fucking stores up in heaven. Heard that you can chill, not worry about the police, not worry about someone fighting, cause everything just a piece. Heard the streets paved with gold, the women all gorgeous. You just flow, can't even fit where the flow.
So to clarify, I'm going to be switching from the 50/50 Prime Core frame that had the Tree 3D printed walls on them. Shout out to Tree, thanks again for letting me use those. I'm going back to the Ground Control Feather Lite 3s. I've really enjoyed my time with the Feather Lite 3s. I think I've used them on every boot that I own. They're just a really good classic anti-rocker frame. Not to mention, you can get stock ones for like 20 bucks, so. I'm gonna start with the build. So easily the biggest difference is the frame wall height. I don't know exactly how much shorter it is, but it's a lot. Because of how short it is, your center of gravity is really low, which is fantastic. Really helps with form and with grinds, in my opinion. That also means there's minimal friction on the walls themselves because there's just less wall. Though it being short threw off my aim, it was really easy to recalculate to that short wall, and I found myself being able to connect my grinds the same very quickly. I don't think anybody is crazy enough to try these things flat. I was doing like a 3-wheel setup for a little while, and I probably will never do that again. It was fun, a good experiment. I wanted to be like Sean Kelso, but you know, I'm not. Anyway, I'm using Inline wax 3D printed blue anti-rockers here. I got these for free when I bought my carbon boots like 8 months ago or whatever, so I don't know how up to date these are. I'm gonna try not to comment too much on them, but so far they've been immaculate. They slide really, really well, and they complement the ground control frame H-block fantastically. The H-block isn't too shallow, which I really like. A lot of H-blocks on anti-rocker frames tend to be way too shallow, and it ends up giving you wheel bite. I like how tall this is because it's already a short frame. But one thing I will say is that because it's so shallow, I found myself riding on top of the anti-rockers a lot, which really isn't the goal, but nevertheless it helps me grind, so I'm a baby skater, I need it. And the other thing about the rounded H-block is that there's a lot more flat space. If you watch my Tree video, you'll know that I love the minimal flat space of the diamond cut on that H-block. Not only does it slide really well, but it guides your foot to be perfectly in the center of your H-block, whereas the ground control frames kind of give you a little bit of weeble wobbling like the Wish frames. Just because they're so wide, there's a lot of give, but at the same time, I feel like that ends up making it harder for you to actually secure your grinds. The Diamond H-block, you do have to aim harder, but I think that in the end, it comes out with better results. Continuing on to a factor that I do consider to be very important, and I think a lot of people do as well, since style is such a huge factor in how we judge skating. I think the aesthetic is very pleasing. I like how short they are. You know, I like big wheel setups because I love Jet Set Radio Future, and that's kind of all they have. But there's something about seeing somebody skate so low to the ground that's really kind of mesmerizing, and that's something that the Kelsos do really well. I like that there's just a slim line that's really ultimately the only thing that's touching the obstacle while you're grinding. I really like the font of the FLT3. That's important to me. I work in marketing, and I'm really picky about fonts. I don't know what this font is, but I like it. He's pretty. And then of course, I love the sickle design. The sickles that get progressively larger from the anti-rocker to the outer wheels, really cool. And not to mention the biggest hardware plus. They have shaped axle bolts. That means you only need one Allen key. That all the time. I was thankful that the Prime Core 50/50 frames had kind of that rounded rectangle, but the Wish frames have 2 circle bolts, which is just not fun, not ideal. And lastly, they wear really well. Like I said, I've tried these on every single boot that I own. They were one of my first pairs of frames, and these are the only frames that I've skated street, so taken raw concrete a few times and they still holding up really well. I'm actually going to try to put out a video when I'm ready to switch frames of trying to break these, so we'll see how that goes. Moving right along on our little wheels to responsiveness. First and kind of most predictably is that jumps are much more slippery. You really have to be straight up and jumping straight up if you want to leave the ground with both feet and not look like a clown slipping on a banana. That being said, I think it's a great trainer for getting your feet to leave the ground at the same time because you kinda have to. You need to be on all 4 of those wheels to really leave the ground properly, or at least for a newbie, you know. The other thing is it's pretty easy to slip out on the small wheels. Again, if you're not straight up on top of them and you're going for a sharp turn, you could hit your sole plate depending on how big it is. I don't really do that on the them skates. I would slip out a lot on the rems and on the shadows because, you know, those sole plates are bigger than my head. It really made me realize I should be exaggerating my knee bends. No matter how much I feel like I'm bending them too much, it's not enough. Ultimately, I think the smaller wheels and shorter frame wall are going to make me focus more on the steez, on the delivery of tricks rather than just doing them. And in doing so, So I realized that I've been hunching my shoulders forward like crazy. I mean, I work with a computer, so that's kind of be expected, but I think what I'm really going to start focusing on is pulling my shoulders back when I do really anything, but mainly grinds. As I watched the footage, I realized that I'm just hunched over. Need to keep that back straight, so that's my next goal. And that's something that anti-rocker helped me realize. Doesn't mean I wouldn't have realized that on flat, no, but it's just what I experienced. Spins are much easier, as you'd imagine, just with less weight and with smaller wheels. You're able to get that flick and spin pretty well, as long as you again are on top of it and can maintain the perfect friction you need to get the spin. Otherwise you'll slip out because small, 4 wheels. And again, coming back to the 4 wheels, that means a harder impact. I totally forgot about that. I don't know how people are doing gaps on 4 wheels. Don't get me wrong, the Prime Core is still in its own league, but going back to small wheels on this and doing big jumps, I definitely was feeling that. The 8 wheels and 72mm, 60mm, those absorb a lot of the impact. That being said, I do have the Flebo buffer on here, and I have realized it does help dampen a lot of the road feeling. That being, you know, any crack, leaf, grain of sand, dust, you'll feel it. I have realized a notable sound difference, and it definitely makes it sound a lot more secure and more of an impact rather than a clack. And last but not least, because truly it is one of the biggest differences between the Wish frame and the Feather Lite 3s, is the wheelbase. The wheelbase is a lot shorter, and honestly, it makes grinds so much easier. It makes jumping easier. Repeating again that yes, you have to be right on top of that frame if you really want to have liftoff, but that's a good form practice. So while the trade-off might be your grind form might not be perfect for flat, I do think anti-rocker is going to help you learn just how to stay on top of your wheels well. So take into account the wobbling you'll get from tall wheels. You will not get practice on that with short wheels. They're just so immaculately different that the short and tall frame walls just need to be experienced to actually know. Alright, finally we get to consistency. This is something I've found to be very, very important in my skates, is I want to have a consistent performance every time I go out, and I want to have that with minimal maintenance. The H-block slides very consistently. Because it's not so shallow and it's not so wide, it does help guide you towards the middle of your foot. But I was spoiled by that diamond cut and I really loved that thing. I think on a small frame wall, the diamond cut would just be incredible. I've heard that that discussion has happened. I would like that. One thing I've noticed that I don't really hear talked about much is that this frame tops out at honestly a really good predictable speed. Because it's meant to be anti-rocker, honestly this thing kind of has a speed limit. It'd be cool for somebody to do an actual speed test between the millimeter sized wheels and different setups. It'd be a long video, but it'd be cool. Ultimately, anti-rocker obviously can't go as fast as flat because there is less surface area. For me it's nice because I approach everything way too fast. I was definitely doing that with the Wish and Tree frames. Though it is obviously something I should work on, I just find it something I put in the very back of my mind when I'm focusing on things like my shoulders and foot position and jumping with my feet at the same time. All these things that a newbie should be focusing on when they really want to learn. For me, going slower is not one of those things. So what's really nice about this for me personally is I feel like I can just go really hard on this frame and I'm going to be able to hit it at a comfortable speed. Something I really love about anti-rock is how much of a slide they ensure. Specifically, these 3D printed wax inline blue anti-rockers slide so well because of the hard filament. Another nice note of consistency with the anti-rocker is the smaller wheels really are just easier to control. And let me first explain what I mean there. While they can be a little squirrely and you can slip out, ultimately I think it's easier to point your heels and toes when you have less friction. Now that does mean you have to be more mindful about your body position because again, you'll slip out. I noticed that with the Wish frames and the Tree frames, even when I was using his harder wheels, that turning itself was more of a challenge. I found that my control on anti-rocker is much better than my control on flat, and that's a personal note, but I have really enjoyed my time back. I've noticed that approaching obstacles is much easier. Like I just said earlier, I feel like I have more control over the small wheels, and I'm less squirrely because I'm not weeble wobbling kind of on like a tall blade. I'm more just kind of on like a brick. You're really just on a rectangle with this thing. And then also the low center of gravity makes it so I have more control over my approach. And last but not least, I've noticed that my confidence is more consistent with these. I'm not scared about wheel bite, so I approach a lot more things than I'm used to doing. I got a sole grind on a round down rail, something that I've never attempted, but I just went and did it with these because I wasn't worried at all about falling over my H-block foot. Ironically enough, even with the shorter frame wall, I wasn't worried about aiming like I thought I was going to be. Something about the anti-rocker frame makes me more confident, and I think it's because, again, I'm just so low, I feel like I have more control. And it's hard for me to be low on bigger wheels, but also on flat from what I've realized because I put so much weight on those wheels that I end up being squirrely. It's something I'm gonna have to learn for both frame setups, don't get me wrong, but I have really enjoyed coming back to anti-rocker, and I think I'm gonna stay for a little while. All right, that concludes a newbie's take on flat to anti-rocker. These are just general observations I've had. I would imagine your experience will vary, but hopefully this gives you enough insight into if you're looking to switch, or if you're looking for why people switch. I hope this gave you what you're looking for. This is your favorite masked park rat signing out. See ya.